Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining Film and Book, a look into the centenary of the Communist Party of China. We have a great program for you today. Of course, first things first, we'd like to thank Xue Ling, the director of the China National Tourist Office in London. Secondly, we'd like to thank the order in which they are being thanked is in the order in which they'll speak as well. And secondly, we'll like to thank Cedric Behrel, managing director of Trinity Cine Asia, Martin Savery, editor-in-chief of ACA Publishing, James Trapp, translator, Stephen Perry, chairman of the 48 Group, and the winner of the China Reform and Friendship Medal, and finally, Peng, the Minister and Counsellor for Cultural Affairs for the Chinese Embassy in the UK. So first things first, to talk a little bit about the event today is Xue Ling 老师 from the the China National Tourist Office in London. Xue 老师, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can I start?
Yes.
Okay. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My story with the film 1921 and the book A Concise History of the Communist Party of China is actually very simple. My love for films dated back in my primary school when I often read the popular films. A monthly magazine started publication in June 1950 in Shanghai, where I had my undergraduate studies. So back to mid-June of 2021. One evening, I received a message from Mr. Cedric Behrel of Cine Asia saying he's very excited to release 1921 in cinemas in the UK, Ireland, and the Middle East in July. And he's hoping to collaborate with the CNTO London again, like what we did last year for the film 800. So almost on the same day, I noticed a message that Miss Ying Wang from Ellen Child's Asia Publishing is going to organize a promotion for the book, A Concise History of the Communist Party of China. An idea immediately hit me. Why not the film and the book together, since they have one thing in common, that is the history of the Communist Party of China. The book could provide further reading for those feeling not enough only after the movie, or for those who want to go deep into the history after seeing the film. So here comes today's joint event of the two, the film 1921 and the book, A Concise History of the Communist Party of China. Thank you.
Thank you, Xue 老师. Next up, I believe we have Cedric Behrel, who will introduce the 1921 film and some of the behind-the-scenes stories from the film. Cedric, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Hello, thank you very much, and hi everyone. It's my honor to present the film 1921, which is being released in the UK on Friday in UK and Ireland, and which I'm pleased to say is going out in 33 cinemas. So there's plenty of opportunity to see it over the next couple of weeks. I think maybe as way of introduction, I was going to show the trailer of the film for those who haven't seen it.
Certainly, I'll pull that up now.
五四这场由知识分子发起的运动，第一次得到了举国的支持。
我们需要建立一个全国性的组织去推动它、实现它。
点燃起熊熊烈火，一发不可收拾。希望到来了。
军阀要我死，我要中国胜。
我们的使命将开始。
出发！
这是中国历史的第一次，
是无比珍贵的第一次，是激荡人心的第一次。开天辟地， 讲讲开始，讲讲开始。
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really love that trailer, I have to say. So I mean, I think you get an idea what the film is about. And what's interesting about the film is that it focused really on the early days of creation of the party. So it takes the first Congress as a central event of the film and focuses on all the men and women involved at the time who are called the pioneers. But also the film is bookended on each side by the events leading to the creation of the party and the events just after the creation of the party. And I think for me, why the film is interesting to watch, as it's just not, it's a piece of history, of course, that not everyone knows or not everyone knows the details of it. And it's very interesting to meet all the characters involved. And of course, it gives a central role to Lida, which is not necessarily widely known in the West, at least. And the story is woven around this central character of Lida and all the different early pioneers who congregated in Shanghai to create the party. My point is that it's an interesting film historically, but also in a human way, because it does really show you people, characters, and show you, I think, there's the idealism of the time and how these young men and women were living in a very turmoil era, were able to realize their dreams and to establish a new China many years later. I think to give you an idea of sort of more intimate and human aspect of the film, I'd like to show you another clip, which is the clip number 2.
欧洲的议会道路在中国行不通。共产党宣言里，马克思说的清清楚楚，实现共产主义的最高原则是要建立一个无产阶级专政。
这一点毋庸置疑，是劳工专政。
旧世界还在眼前，武装掌握在军阀手里，而我们却只有笔杆子。究竟该如何进行暴力革命？
我们可以把工人组织起来，依靠他们，武装他们。
我们的决议草稿中已经充分强调了工人运动的重要性。
农民呢？
农民，陈胜吴广，这不是马克思主义啊。
Thank you. So I just selected that clip just to show you the sort of how the history is being lived in that film and discussed by all the people who were there at the time. So the film is full of this discussion, which are very lively discussion between the characters. But also, as I said before, I think the portrait of young men and women, trying to establish a new order and fighting for their sort of ideals. All of that interspersed with Shanghai thriller-esque atmosphere, which was very much the case in Shanghai in the 20s, which we've seen in other films. But it's woven in that story because it's, of course, an international story as well of Russian envoys, Japanese envoys, and this kind of intricate cat and mouse games that you will see once you see the film. So I just want to say it's a very historically important film, very accurate in its depiction of the time. The film was 5 years in the making. I think the producers decided to make that film in 2016 and painfully recreated all of the major sites in full scale. So for example, Lida's house was recreated to scale. So was the dorm, which is Bonus Girls Schools, where a lot of the guests were staying at the time. So I think this attention to detail and also the drives that you can see in the actors playing these parts make it for very compelling viewing. And also, I think it's probably my final point. As I said before, there's a very human element in the film, which is of course it's about big themes, as we've just seen. It's about big ideas, but it's also about intimate relations between these people and this group who were very close. And I think that's very well shown in the film, and especially in that moment, which I like to show you now, which is the first meeting between Mao Zedong and Lida.
贺明，润之兄到了。
润之兄，书信多年，终于见面喽！对了对了，贺明兄，刚到上海你就请客，缘分嘞！哎呀，客气客气，多放辣椒哦。好好好，你先坐，你先坐，菜马上就好了。
天热，你先把长衫挂那儿吧。
好，好。
哎，任之兄，喝点酒啊！
啊。一个辣菜都没有啊！
我们家堂客不吃辣。
你别赖我一个人啊！我胆儿大，我敢吃辣椒的，再辣我也敢吃的。
完了完了，湖南完了！
你以为我不馋啊？我现在是胃不行了，我吃点辣，胃疼得要命。
还不是因为他长期伏案，作息不规律，饥一顿饱一顿给闹的。
所以，对不住啊，凑合吃吧。来，
辛苦了。
你笑什么？
我是觉得一个湖南人能如此尊重妇女，真乃吾辈之榜样。
挖苦我。润之啊，我每天熬夜写文章办刊物，给长沙也积蓄不少了吧？为什么从来没收过1分钱的回款呢？
贺明兄，你的文章是年轻人心头的一盏灯。我们刚刚起步，捉襟见肘，但凡稍有缓解，立刻奉还。这是长沙文化书社赊欠共产党杂志收费账单，一一记录，请贺明兄留存。对不住了。
毛润之，听好了，咱们俩，我供货，你分销，就像开公司一样。如今呢，新公司要开张了，这是天大的好事。今天我破例陪你喝一杯。
我也要。
男女平等吧。
好，男女平等。
为新公司开业大吉，
为早日开启全国之民智，
为早日结束中国之苦难。
干杯！
干杯！
So again, I think that shows really the sort of tone in the film and the incredible work that the actors have done in bringing to life these historical figures and making them very human. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say about the film. I hope I've whet the appetite of the audience on this call to go and see it. It will, as I said before, it will be shown in cinemas from tomorrow all over the UK and also in Ireland, in Dublin, and there are special previews tonight.
Thank you very much for that, Cedric, and thank you for providing those clips. That looked amazing. Next up, we have Martin Savery, the chief editor of ACA Publishing, who will introduce some of his experiences in producing the Communist Party of China, A Concise History. Martin, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Good. Good morning, everybody. So as editor of this latest edition of the History of the Chinese Communist Party, I'd like to just summarize some of the sort of key points and highlights in this long 100-year story that stood out to me when editing this book. And then I'll hand over to James Trapp, who will talk a little bit more about the actual mechanics of how we did it on a very tight time frame with a team of 6 excellent translators, many of whom are here with us today. Thank you. So, well, the Communist Party of China has come a long way in 100 years, from just a handful of attendees representing some 50 members countrywide at its inaugural party congress in the former French concession of Shanghai in July 21, to no less than 95 million members today. If the CPC was a country, that membership would qualify it as the 15th biggest country in the world in terms of population. The CPC was born into a world where China was on its knees after the decay and eventual collapse of its last imperial dynasty, the Qing dynasty. Due to its weak and chaotic state, China, famously described as the sick man of East Asia at that time, was powerless to prevent the world's imperial powers from seizing its territory and running roughshod over its people and its institutions. Today, China has the second biggest economy in the world, is a nuclear power, and has an active space program. A long journey indeed. The CPC attributes its first 100 years of success to the leadership and ingenuity of 5 great leaders who at various stages coalesced the party membership around actions and a philosophy that would advance the party and the country. Those 5 leaders, pictured at the front of the book, are Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping, who between them span the party's entire history to date. That's not to suggest that there weren't hundreds and thousands of other leaders and rank and file party members that made huge contributions to the party's history, including many who laid down their lives for the cause, as the book recounts in great detail. But these 5 men are portrayed in the book not only as being the key leaders or main representatives of the party, as the book records it, but also as the ideological or thought leaders that between them, at each critical point in the party's history, managed to figure out how to adapt Marxism, which after all was initially a foreign, if not alien, philosophy to China, to suit China's particular circumstances. Hence the establishment of the CPC's ongoing philosophy of socialism with Chinese characteristics. As the book narrates, the challenges facing the CPC today are very different from what the early founders faced in the 20s. They had to fight to survive. Mao's famous maxim, "Power grows out of the barrel of a gun," was used to good effect to win the civil war against the KMT, the Kuomintang or Nationalist Party, and to defeat the Japanese invaders. And I quote from the book here, at the end of 1941, Japan's total military strength expanded to 2.4 million men, among which 1.3 million were in China. That's the end of the quote. If this is correct, then China was pinning down over half of Japan's total military strength within its territory, undoubtedly taking considerable pressure off the US and its allies fighting their Pacific War against Japan. After nearly 30 years of fighting, the CPC's revolution was successful, resulting in the founding of the PRC in 1949. Then the CPC's focus shifted from guerrilla warfare to rebuilding the nation's infrastructure and economy and continuing land reform. The party has pursued 2 centenary goals over the past decades, and the book concludes, and I quote, "The first centenary goal of building an all-round moderately prosperous society was achieved on the 100th anniversary of the founding of the CPC. That's this month, July 2021. The second centenary goal is to build China into a modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious and beautiful by the 100th anniversary of the founding of the PRC. So that's October 2049. So the CPC has 28 years by its own definition left to achieve its second centenary goal. This book is the latest in a series of party histories published in Chinese by the People's Publishing House. The last edition published also in English was 1994. So this is the first update of the official orthodox version of the party's own history, published in English for 2.5 decades. And in fact, the latest Chinese edition was only published in March this year. So this English edition is literally hot off the press. As you can imagine, the tight deadline we were under to translate and publish the English edition put our excellent translators under immense pressure to complete the job before the July 1 deadline. So I must give a shout out to them all here in chronological order, in the order in which they translated the content. So that's Hui Cooper and Dennis Cooper, Mr. Hai Wang Yuan, Martin Ward, James Trapp, and Ms. Zhang Lin. Without their experience, dedication, and commitment, we wouldn't have been able to meet the challenging deadline for this project. So without more ado, I'd like to hand over to James Trapp to say a few words on behalf of our team of translators. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Hi.
Go ahead, James.
Okay. Minister, Counsellor, Director Xue, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. Somehow that does sound a lot better in Chinese, but never mind. Good morning or good afternoon to any of you who happen to be joining us from China. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you briefly about the translation project for 中国共产党简史. I'm also flattered to be one of the 6 translators chosen to do this presentation. I'm under no illusions that this is any indication of status, as my collaborators are all far more distinguished than I am. It's simply that our editors know how fond I am of the sound of my own voice. Could I also just say at this moment that watching those clips from the movie, I felt that genuine surge of spark of excitement that I remember feeling right at the beginning of my Chinese studies back in the 1970s, when Chinese history and literature and language began to open up to me. I don't know what it was about it, but something just hit me. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the whole film. That aside, I'm sure that I speak for all the team of translators in saying that it was a privilege to be involved in the production of this translation. And we are justifiably proud of the work we've done. As Martin has said, we had to work at a pace that some of us at least are not particularly accustomed to. And also with a precision that we are sometimes spared in our more literary work. However, the most credit of all should go to our editor, Martin Savery, for the extraordinary work he did, collating the different sections from different translators and ensuring consistency of voice and official terminology. With 6 different translators in 5 teams working on this, that's a quite extraordinary thing to have managed within the timescale allotted us. On a slightly more personal note, I was of course very interested in the translation project as a whole, but particularly pleased with the section I was allocated, which covers from the end of 2002 to 2017. I first visited China in the early 1980s, when the only cars on Beijing streets were hongqi, and there were still millions of bicycles and even the occasional horse-drawn cart. In Shanghai, you walked along Nanjing Donglu on raised walkways, and Pudong was just mudflats and paddy fields. I didn't return again until 2006, when the transformation was already mind-boggling, but still nothing to what was to unfold over the next decade. At that time, I was fortunate enough to be visiting many different parts of the country, 2 or 3 times a year, leading Western tour groups. So I saw not just the miraculous growth of the urban jungles in the big cities, but also the completion of the Three Gorges Dam and the continuous changes to rural living conditions. I also still remember what I think of as the slight bewilderment on the faces of the inhabitants of the cities themselves as they were swept along in this tidal wave of modernization. It was therefore particularly interesting and instructive to me to be translating the relevant section of the book, which has given me some understanding of how this whole process was viewed and regulated at the highest levels of the Chinese government, and how the underlying ideological and cultural consistency was maintained in the face of the riptide of changes that was sweeping not just China, but the whole world. I think for all of us, the translation work was interesting in a different way from normal, as no great degree of interpretation was needed. But what was required was a high degree of accuracy and consistency, because it was only through those that the underlying story of the growth and development of the Communist Party of China could be properly read. The great significance of this work is the opportunity it gives politicians, historians, sinologists, and the general public to see directly into the workings of the government of this extraordinary country, China, and to understand the way it sees internal and external events and how it reacts to them. The bilateral opacity of genuinely different fundamental social and political philosophies is the greatest barrier to improving relations across the globe. And if this volume makes a contribution in any way to dispelling some of this, I think we may all consider it a job very well done. I would also at this stage like to say I hope that my fellow translators don't mind me speaking on their behalf in this respect, but I certainly felt it was a great privilege to be part of this work, and I feel that it is of genuine importance, and I hope that actually the combination of this book and the film may make a significant contribution to better understanding. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for that, James. Thank you. Sounds like you had a great time translating that. Next up, we have Stephen Perry, who will talk about his personal experience of both him and his father, Jack Perry's contribution to the different stages of Chinese development. Stephen, can you hear us?
Can hear you. Can you hear me?
Indeed.
Good. Does that go?
Please do.
Minister, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be invited to speak today. I usually speak about business matters, and as a priest at a memorial service once said, the person he was talking about was rather unusual. He was rather interesting, he said, which is unusual for a businessman. And I smiled and thought, yes, probably true. So I'm not going to talk to you about business today. Someone once asked me to send a script of what I was going to say in a speech. And I said, I don't actually usually write a script. I usually listen to what is being said and adapt my comments to what I'm hearing. When you have something like 100 years of the Communist Party of China, it's such an enormous subject. It's very difficult to reduce it to a set of words in a few minutes. When I was asked to speak here today, I was asked to set it against the experience of my father and myself, our personal experience of China. But let me just say that earlier on, the editor mentioned that there's 28 years remaining of China's transformation from reform and opening up to the creation of the modern socialist China. 28 years is what it took from 1921 to become the government of China on October 1st, 1949. There are many political parties in the world. I don't think more than a handful have become the government of their countries in the way in which it happened in China after a war against Japan and a civil war. And in just 28 years, those 13 delegates produced the government of China. That in itself is an incredible achievement. And we've heard some insights today already about the terrible conditions that they had to endure. When my father first went to China, well, that was after Zhou Enlai sent his chief of staff to the UK to find someone to reopen trade with China. He was introduced to my father by professors at Cambridge, one of whom, Joseph Needham, had met Xue Ling in Chongqing in the 1940s when he was the scientific advisor from the UK. He said he learned much more than he advised on. He met my father and he asked him if he would help him reopen trade with Europe. And my father said, well, I don't really know very much about international trade. Why do you think I can help you? And Xi Ting's reply was, well, we don't know very much either, but if you are impressed by what we're trying to do and by us, then we can learn together. And my father accepted after talking to my mother and began what was for him a wonderful experience of getting to know China. My father tells the story of being the leader or the organizer of the icebreaker mission in 1953, when 19 people went to do the first trade deal between China and the West. And it took them 7 days to fly to Hong Kong. They were there for a few days in enormous heat and humidity. And he was summoned to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning by ferry to Zhuhai and Macau, and then on to Beijing. He got to the ferry with Xi Jinping, and it was overcrowded enormously. There were several hundred people there. There was a deck area, and they'd cleared a small area with a table and 2 chairs. And my father and Dr. Xi were sat there, and around them were starving people, whose clothes were hardly on their bodies. And they're all staring at him and Dr. Xi. And then they brought food for them. And my father said to Dr. Xi, I can't eat. This is too upsetting for me to see all these starving people and to eat food. And Dr. Xi said, it's your first lesson in China, Mr. Perry, or Jack as he called him. So this is, the people here will expect us to give you food because you're our guest. And they would be upset if you don't eat. And so my father did eat a few mouthfuls, he told us. And in those 3 days from then to arriving in Beijing, he saw the devastation that was China. He told us about it when he came back. He had tears in his eyes then, he had tears in his eyes when he came back. It was the only time in my life I saw my father cry. The destruction in China was beyond imagination, not just from the war against Japan, not just from the Civil War, not just from the complete collapse of the economy, not just from the diseases that were all over China, not just from the drugs that were taken into China. It was the totality of the people's conditions, seen elsewhere, probably in Europe a few years earlier. It's hard to imagine that any party could have taken the government of their country in 28 years, but to have turned China from what he saw in 1953 and what I saw in 1972, almost 50 years ago, which was a country with lots and lots of agricultural production everywhere, people with clothes, lots of bicycles, not so many cars, and a certain adequacy of the level of the economy and society. It's amazing, that transformation that took place. And when people talk about the transformation of reform and opening up from 1978, they forget what the Chinese Communist Party did from 1949 to 1978. Even though it had the difficulties of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, it was an enormous contribution to the transformation of China. And it was from a party whose people never stopped working, my father said, and I saw it when I went there. Selfless people who worked hard night and day to deliver China back into being the leading nation that it is again now today. I first went to China in 1972. I was part of the mission that did the first deals between the United States and China. And I went to live in the United States and experienced the tensions that there were between the United States and China. But of course, what I found most significantly when I was in the United States was the people there were fascinated by China. They wanted to understand the people who'd built their railroads, the people who were denied access to the citizenship of their country for almost 100 years. It's an amazing experience observing this opening up of China to the last remaining major country which had shut its doors to China. And as we were just hearing, the transformation in reform and opening up is amazing. Every time I go there, it looks different. But if we look ahead now to the next 28 years, just 28 years, China is going to transform again, and we won't recognize it from what it is now. It's going to create this new socialist China, but it's going to create it around 4 regions, probably more later. One is the Greater Bay Area around Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Another is around Shanghai to Nanjing. Another around Beijing and Tianjin. And the fourth is Chongqing and Chengdu, stretching back into Xinjiang. The transformation of China that's going to take place, the reorganization of cities into metropolises, will stun us all. I'm quite sure of that. And people say to me, why do you think this can be achieved? And I said, just look at the last 40 years, look at the last 70 years. The transformation of China is one of the most incredible achievements in mankind, if not the most incredible achievement in mankind. And it's done by people, by a party which is so committed, so determined, but at its core is its history of the Chinese people, of the way they are. They brought science and civilization to the world long before there were isms to talk about. Our industrial revolution depended largely on the science and innovations of China, all given to the West free, without licenses or anything like that at all. But the history of China, the philosophy of China, the ways of China are vitally important. But the other thing that's there from the core of Marxism is something called the scientific method. And, you know, when people look at BRI, OBOR, the New Silk Road, whatever you want to call it, or any of the innovations of China, it is the product of the scientific method, which means a great deal of vision is used, then a great deal of testing out of ideas, and it's not allowed to go into operation until it's been examined from every different direction. So when people say to me, what have we got to learn from China today? I say everything. The government of China is transforming China. Just look at its health and welfare structures, to name just 2 simple areas where China is taking health and welfare out of taxation and into a completely different source of income, the solution to many of the problems of the budgets of national governments in the West. China's approach in the scientific method is non-ideological. It's about finding out what works and delivering it to the people of China. And in the end, and probably this is the most important in my experience, why is the Chinese Communist Party so successful? I think it is because it hears the people, because it's united deeply into the people. It's not a governing party remote from the people. It is part of the people. And the 95 million members today are a way of seeing just that. So for me, who had the joy of taking Andrew Lloyd Webber's shows to China as part of my work, taking the first football teams to China, those parts of the culture and sports activities that I've been involved in have been enjoyable. But it has been taking ordinary business people to China and letting them see and explore the Chinese people and China themselves. I've been very privileged and very lucky. I was very fortunate to have a father who was my father, who is the founder of the Icebreakers. And I've had the opportunity to see China. And I hope that with some of the fine people here today who have done interpretation is the key to everything with China. Interpreting between China and Chinese and British and English is not like French to English. The Chinese language is a concept language, not mere words. The books that are being translated, the film that's being done, they're all ways of bringing understanding so as we can move away from this difficult era we're in now and back into an era when West and China meet each other, understand each other, and enjoy each other. And that's my contribution for today. And thank you all for inviting me. And thank you for all those who have done the hard work to make this book come to life and the film that I hope to see. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. It's fascinating to hear your family's history with China. I'm sure all members of the audience have plenty of questions, and I see a few have actually directly messaged it to me. So let me just pull them up and then we'll try and answer a few. Great. The first one actually is directed at Stephen. Stephen, could I just unmute you for a second? Oop. It is Stephen is a rare expert in a world who understands the Chinese development of China after the founding of the People's Republic of China. And this person would like to ask, why does he think that what is considered the West now seems to harbor such negative feelings towards China? And how, to his understanding, how would he try and resolve some of these misunderstandings?
You know, I think that some would have tried to stop China, to contain China, to restrain China from getting to where it's arrived at 10, 15, 20 years ago. But they weren't able to because we had an incredible financial crisis hit the world. And before that, we had the 9/11 and the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. These events in world history blocked the focus on China. President Obama tried to tilt to Asia, and that involved trying to establish TPP and a transatlantic trade organization, which were designed to limit the impact of China into the world. They didn't work, and so they tried the Trump approach to dealing with China, and that really didn't work either. So we have now a black period when those who would want to retain the old way of the world are trying to isolate China, make it the unclean and unpleasant part of the world. Personally, I doubt that it will work because the true story of China will come through. There are issues that arise in the development of any country which will need to be reviewed in time, but they're being used for propaganda purposes. And the reply from China is propaganda-based as well. It's the way of the world that we're in right now. Will it last for long? I don't think so, because the Chinese economy is so vibrant that it will have a continued attraction for business from all over the world. But I think just the point I would make is that there is an assertion that China's interest is in hegemony, to being the superpower of the world. I have seen that the Chinese have done series on televisions about the empires of the world and about how they all fail. And it's also not in the Chinese history to send soldiers overseas to become an empire. It's not what the Chinese naturally do. So I think that it's better to focus on what the Chinese do intend to do. And what the Chinese do intend to do is to make a modern nation for themselves and to build Asia into a vibrant continent based on free trade. And I think that what we're seeing now is the first stage of the East Asian free trade area, which will then add Central Asia, South Asia, Eurasia with Russia, and the Middle East into one incredible continent, which will link with Europe and Africa, the connected parts of the world, which probably account for about 85% of the world's population. That is China's ambition. That is what Xi Jinping talks about, the community of shared interest. That is what BRI is leading to. And it's a great opportunity for us all. If we took China at its word and said, this is what they're doing, then our interest is how to protect our interests and how to protect global security. And that's the debate that's not happening yet, but I think it will.
Thank you so much for that, Jack. Thank you so much. I believe the next one is actually directed at Councillor Peng. Peng, are you unmuted? I'll unmute you. And it is, China has been very effective in controlling the new coronavirus, and that much is obvious now, I think. And can you take this opportunity to tell the audience how China does it?
Yeah, I think roughly, I'm not in this area, but as a ordinary, as one of the people who watched this development from afar here in Britain. I was in Britain since 2019. I think roughly there are three elements, I think, which are important. One is a very strong political will of the leadership to maintain that to protect people's well-being in this crisis. The second, I think, because of that, because of what I said, is a strong support from the general public of the government, from the people. And third element, I think, is a dedication and commitment from the professionals, from the key workers, from doctors, nurses, and scientists. And people are willing to listen to them, willing to do what the government, based on the science research, and to do what they should do. I think that would be that my conclusion of the achievements of China's anti-COVID-19 campaign, if I may say so.
There's another question here, which is actually directed at the member of the audience, Julia Lovell, I believe. Julia, are you with us? Julia is, not for the members of the audience that don't know, is a very famous academic and translator here in London. And she's translated many books, most notably recently, Journey to the West, one of China's Grand Four classics. And this member of the audience would just like to ask if she can talk about the great influence of Chinese work and how it helps the understanding of the West's understanding of China.
Thank you for that question. Well, as a translator and a historian of China, it's my... Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Perfect, great. Yeah, as a translator, historian, writer about China, it's my job to engage with as much Chinese language material as I possibly can. And I feel very passionately that working as a translator is a really effective and valuable way of helping non-Sinophone readers to engage with the sort of very particular individual nature of experience in China. So when you choose a work of literature to translate, what you are translating, when you boil it down to its essence, is one individual's take on their perception of whatever reality they are writing about. It's one individual's experience of the world. So as a translator, in the most sort of fundamental sense, I think it's bringing individuals into dialogue with each other across cultures. So it's bringing individual writers into contact with individual readers. So as a translator, you're a bridge, making that kind of dialogue and sort of access to other perspectives possible by bringing writing in a language like Chinese into English for readers who can't access the original directly themselves.
Thank you so much for that, Julia. Thank you very much. I think we're just about reaching the end of our program today, but as a final segment, Mr. Yu Peng would just like to speak a few words of thanks.
Respected Stephen Perry, I saw the Jenny Clark and Julia Lover, Ying, of course, Cedric Martin, James, and all the translators, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. And 2 days ago, in his keynote address at the CPC and the World Political Party Summit in Beijing, President Xi Jinping said, over the past 100 years, the CPC has persisted in closely associating the future of the Chinese people with that of other peoples of the world, and steer the course of China's development amid the general trend of the world and the currents of the times, and to promote common development and prosperity of all countries. And he said the historic achievements the CPC and the Chinese people have made would not have been possible without the generous support of the world peoples. Today, I think we are witnessing once again how fitting and right his words and remarks are. On behalf of the Chinese Embassy in the UK, may I express our high appreciation to Trinity Cine for bringing into UK and elsewhere the film 1921, which focused on CPC's young pioneers through vivid human stories, and to ACA Publishing for translating and publishing the CPC's concise and orthodox history reader in just 3 months, with hard work, dedication, and a commitment. And also, I want to thank you all for this informative, inspiring, and thought-provoking remarks and speeches that we hear today. But our special thanks go to Stephen Perry and his family, the first generation of icebreakers of China-UK relations, led by Mr. Perry's late father, Mr. Jack Perry. And in 1950s, Jack Perry overcame various obstacles and broke the ice to trade with New China. Over the years, Stephen has carried on this family tradition of icebreakers, making active efforts to enhance UK-China cooperation on economy, trade, culture. Stephen, I hope that you could have more engagement with the culture in the future, like before, and people-to-people exchanges. He has also initiated the young icebreakers and the women icebreakers. And he has been what we said, old friend, a good friend of China, of the Chinese people. And I think today's event is simply another proof that the spirit of icebreakers keeps on going. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Daniel.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Mr. Yu. I think we are at 11:30 right now, so we're just in time to bring this to a close. But before we do, we'd like to thank our media partners for this event, Novelle de Europe UK edition, as well as the sponsors for this event, Guanghua Bookshop and the Mother Bridge of Love, for their support. We would like to thank once again all the VIPs in attendance, that is Xue Ling, Cedric Behrel, Martin Savery, James Trapp, Stephen Perry, and Yu Peng. And we would like to, for making this event possible, special thanks to Yu Guo of the Chinese Embassy for doing so much to help us organize this, as well as the 2 interpreters today from the University of Bath, Zhang Chen and Zhu Jianxuan. Thank you very much, ladies, for your hard work. We hope this event was enjoyable for you, and we hope that you have a wonderful Thursday. And thank you very much all for attending once again, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much. Bye.